when you play a game and a GM tells you that a challenge is trivial, it doesn't feel as good from the player's point of view as if you, the player, are deputized to say that challenge is trivial.
Okay, I have to start with, oh my God, that ending. When the dome went dark and we got to see it on the walls. Oh, that was so cool.
Oh, I'm so glad. We were so excited for that moment. We were so excited. How cool is that?
It was amazing. And the clues leading up to it was so good.
Shout out to Derek and Ruby, our amazing projection designers, and Rick Perry, our creative producer, production designer. Oh, that moment. And Kevin Stiller, who our incredible DP Mentopolis. Oh my God, Kevin just absolutely popped off with the lighting effects and the practicals for Mentopolis this season. Yeah, that moment at the end. Whoo! How about it? That's why we do it, baby. That's why we do it.
I love it. I also love that this season very much felt like you watched Inside Out and went, I know what this needs. No more.
Some of my favorite seasons we've done have not been just a mashup of like two different genres, but often a mashup of kind of like, like A Crown of Candy is not high fantasy. It's really particularly the kind of intense, political, brutal, Game of Thronesian, like political high fantasy. And there have been a couple of movies that have, and a couple of stories that have that sort of like the mind as a city or the body as a city. Some people have thrown Osmosis Jones out there as well as another point of reference. And it's just really exciting to, I think, the more specific you can get with the pop culture touchstones that you're either parodying or referencing or paying homage to, the better. So it was really fun to do the film noir version of something that's normally the cute little animated, like whether it's Osmosis Jones or whatever, or Inside Out. It's like, we're little guys in a brain, and then doing a gritty, mean streets of Mentopolis kind of remake of that. It feels fun.
It feels like there's a mental health angle with this as well. Like the stuff that stood out to me was that oxytocin is an illegal drug, and this idea that the big guy doesn't deserve to be like happy or feel pleasure until he has outside validation and has completed his task. Can you talk a little bit about that?
We did a bunch of amazing consultations with psychologists and mental health professionals. And we wanted to be really clear, I think, that the characters read as like functions of the mind, right? So that you have Conrad Shintz as conscience, and you have Imelda Pulse as impulse, Anastasia Tension as attention, that these are sort of much like Inside Out, that has like these primary emotions, that we sort of have the main characters as these primary cognitive functions. And so we worked with a lot of different psychologists. And I think there's an interesting, like the angle here on what's happening with the big guy is that we see that the big guy's like there are elements of what's happening in the brain that give you a lot of clues about what's happening in the big guy's life. What does it mean that like all of his interests have been shunted off to the side, and that he's under this prohibition of these hormones and chemicals that provide feelings of like oxytocin or other different pleasure is sort of illegal in the city right now. So yeah, there's definitely an element where you're able to infer what's happening to the big guy based on kind of the political realities of Mentopolis.
I also thought it was really interesting that these guys don't know what's going on. Like there is that element of you have the government hiding things and that aspect of it too. And then Conscience being this character that you would think would be a really big deal. And nope, it's a scared kid. And you have the backstory of why it's a scared kid, which I thought was brilliant. So can you talk a little bit about that? Like the secrecy element and how that works into this idea of they're all part of the same brain, though.
Absolutely. And a lot of this are intersections between not only psychology, but also the places that psychology intersects and aligns with philosophy, which is my background. And, a ton of like, think about the number of functions going on in your nervous system that do not require your conscious like attention. Like, it's easy, like breathing, your heart, all these like autonomic functions of the body. But even more than that, there's a ton of other things that happen. Like, think about that something will bring up a memory or bring up a thought in your head. So there's a ton of things going on in the brain that are not if the brain was just a machine being piloted by your conscious self, we would be totally unrecognizable as a species. There's a lot of stuff going on in your brain that's just running in the background. So there was an idea in Mentopolis to be like, the conscious mind is actually a smaller fragment of the larger workings of the mind, right? Which is very much something that, philosophy and psychology align on, right? There's a lot going on other than just whatever you're paying attention to. And then a lot of that has to do with like ethical theories about the fact that like that awareness and being aware of one's self is not a given. That takes a lot of work to like work on yourself and be like, well, what is motivating me to do the things I'm doing and to say the things I'm saying? And, the idea of someone whose conscience is like a little bit of a scared kid in a mind that's being run by ambition or being run by other stuff. I mean, that's a situation that like, I think you look at the world we live in and you wonder, are there a lot of people who maybe are like running other programming than we might think they are?
I think one of the things that stood out to me too about Conrad specifically was not only like the origin of why Conrad is like this, but how small a win he wants, like holding the door open for someone. When it was like, man, can you imagine? I'm like, oh no, that's like such a like low bar. Can you talk a little bit about Conrad's journey in this? Because I also loved how Conrad and the Fix gravitate towards each other, because I so didn't expect that.
So there's a big classic noir trope there of the heavy or like the hitman taking a shine to a kid, right? That's a trope. That's the Mandalorian. It's like we see a lot of tropes of like a gritty, scary figure that finds a kid, and like that's the bridge too far, right? And I think that you see that there's this sort of like this critical moment in the Fix and Conrad's relationship is this moment where the DA, who's been using this sort of hitman criminal character in the Fix, and is like, this kid is the next on the docket. And that's something that the Fix, it's like, that's the bridge too far. And that's like a classic noir trope of like, oh, I've been given a mission and this is the one I've done a lot of dirt, but this is the one thing I can't do. Right. And I think that like, in terms of, you're going to have to see, I mean, like all of this is the players, like Hank and Alex do an amazing job. So you'll see where Alex takes Conrad throughout the story. But it was amazing talking to Alex about their goals for Conrad, because there's the depiction of the conscience, not as a like big, powerful, sort of scolding authority, but as just like a little kid who's like, come on, better. Like, better is a very, there's like, I love the way Alex chose to not make the character, they're not aggressive. Mm-hmm. Conrad's not aggressive. It's just like, it's just having that voice in your head that's like, oh, if we could hold the door open for somebody, wouldn't that be so nice? Like, yeah, it's very sweet. I think all the choices that Alex and Hank made were phenomenal.
Yes, having your master plan be, I'll change the order of newspaper. Mm-hmm. I was like, you win. I immediately love you, because that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
So funny. Really, really great. Yeah, Alex did an amazing job with Conrad in this season.
And I love that this season had a combination of people that have played in the Dome before and people that haven't. Can you talk about that a little bit and how that dynamic impacted the table? Because it's such a fun like flow between all the players.
Oh, for sure. Well, I mean, so I had played with everybody at the table but Hank before. I had played with Alex in a streaming game for Wander Home that Fortunate Horse did. I had played with Freddie for Roll20 Chaos. in a little side thing for Roll20. And then obviously Danielle and Mismatch, and Siobhan's an Intrepid Hero, and Trap had done Escape from the Bloodkeep. So that was all really, really fun and exciting. The having Hank in the Dome was so amazing. And I've been watching Hank's content for forever and ever. I was watching the Vlog Brothers. I'm an OG nerd fighter from back in the day. And I had met Hank on the Project for Awesome. Hank had invited me to do the Project for Awesome. And so we had, the first time I met Hank, it was him injecting Dr. Pepper flavored baked beans into a chili corn dog. And if people don't check out the Project for Awesome, you really should. It's a hoot over there, raising money for a good cause. Yes, having them all in the Dome was incredible, and it was very fun to be playing with. Like, there were a lot of big goofy energy at the table, which felt very fun to bring to like a thing as like gritty as noir. So like for all of our noirness, there's like a lot of goofs. It's very screwball kind of comedy over there, which is great.
I love noir, but I love like the comedy noir because it's just like I love when the table chants tropes.
Mm-hmm.
That completely just every time is amazing to me. I was curious, what is your favorite pun? Because this may be one of the most like punny seasons, and I love that.
There's so many. I come back to how good of a mixing of noir and like the nickname The Fix is so good, because there's literally an expression from that time period, the fix is in, right? Like of like that something illegal or sinister has happened and it's changed something. And to do that for hyperfixation is just, it's just really, really, that's really joyful to me. I love that. But yeah, it was just so much fun. And then of course, Trap's brainstorm at the table. My God, like how did I brainstorm? Of course. Oh my God. Trap, he never misses, man. He can't miss.
And then what do you think the genre is in your mental world?
I would say whatever my mind city is, it's probably a big old like Gormenghast style castle. I think it's like an enormous that feels right to me. Or maybe a little bit like the way that Dream's palace is represented in the Sandman series. That feels like because there's a lot of genres in there, so you kind of need a meta genre that can hold all the other genres, right? That feels about right to me. I like the idea of a big, partially lucid dream state, a palatial structure. At least I hope that's what it is. Who knows? Maybe it's a burning gas station. That's also, some days it's that. You're like, oh my God, it's already bad and it can get so much worse.
I feel like it's some days for that for everyone.
Yes, for sure.
And then I thought it was very cool that you're playing a new game system in this.
Yes.
It's on bikes, which I also love the shout out to Abria at the beginning. That was very funny. Can you talk about why that system works better for the story you were trying to tell with this season?
Essentially, right? We are honored and privileged to get to work with Rick Perry to create battle sets for our more traditional tactical combat seasons. In seasons where the genre, like noir, doesn't have big epic combats like a high fantasy story has, and so it sort of doesn't make sense to do big miniature sets for a season like that. And as soon as you've made the decision not to do tactical combat, all of a sudden you're sort of like wavering, and it makes sense to go all the way the other direction to a system that really stays frenetic and fast paced in terms of how it resolves those kinds of challenges. The reason a system like Kids on Bikes, and it's such a brilliant, both Kids on Bikes, which we use for Mentopolis, although we use a heavily modified version of it, and then Kids on Brooms, which we used for Misfits and Magic, which is the first time I played it. If you are not going to have crunch, and crunch is great for certain genres. Like if you go watch a Starstruck Odyssey, which is the SW5E hack, which is even crunchier than normal D&D, when you're deep in a sci-fi setting, you want to be hearing abilities and the names of weapons rattled off, and this is my thermal blaster, and I detonated this, and it does this much damage. Blah, blah, blah. It's the technical feeling of a computer going that roots you in that genre. Noir is so much more visceral than that. So the ability to go like roll a fight check, you succeed, we're moving on, right? Really helps the pacing of that kind of story. Why I love Kids on Bikes the most is that, number one, for actual play, its rule sets are very diegetic, meaning that all of the character abilities and the way adversity tokens work, the way that like your stacked skills work, is it's really easy to understand your abilities as functions of your character rather than necessarily a system which would potentially deputize players as also being partially GMs, in which case they have to split their focus between being in the character's point of view and then outside of the character's point of view, which is great for some genres and great for some performances. But I think for the way Dimension 20 works, it's often better to have people know that their goal is to just be in character as much as possible, right? Yeah. And then number two is the having mechanic in Kids on Bikes. This is like a very in-depth answer for this question, but I love Kids on Bikes so much. The having mechanic is incredible. It's the one mechanic from Kids on Bikes that I wish I could steal and put in other games, which is when you have a really powerful ability as the character, there are difficulties that are low enough that you can take half the value of the die you're rolling and just succeed. The reason that mechanic is so brilliant is that when you play a game and a GM tells you that a challenge is trivial, it doesn't feel as good from the player's point of view as if you, the player, are deputized to say that challenge is trivial. Like if you're like, I'm a powerful warrior, I'm running around, and a DM says, okay, there's some guards, beating them is easy. You beat them and you move on. Then you as the warrior are like, oh, I guess that challenge wasn't that meaningful. I guess being good at fight. I guess I win that fight. I kind of made my character to, I wanted moments of feeling empowered to kind of overcome those obstacles, but I guess the GM is saying it's not that big a deal. We'll move on. In my experience, it's way more cool for a GM to go, here's a challenge. There's a fight in your way. And for the person playing the warrior to go, actually, based on the difficulty you've set, this fight is trivial. It accomplishes the same thing of removing a die roll and letting the story progress quickly. But the fact that the player is empowered to say that the challenge is trivial makes a huge bit of difference. I hope that makes sense, but I think
it's your agency and your part of telling the story. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Like, challenge, and I welcome anyone who disagrees with me, but I feel like having players be able to dismiss challenges and putting that ball on that court is way better, because it starts to get weird when a GM is dismissing some challenges and not others, because it sort of saps some of the impartiality of a GM being like, no, my job is just to present the world to you, not to tell you what is and is not important. And so it's cool for players to be able to say, this is trivial. Oh, no, this is challenging, right? I love that.
I do too. I think that's definitely like one of the most fun parts of watching when you guys play in the system. And then can you talk a little bit about character creation? Because it feels like it's such a balance of like the trope for the noir setting, the kind of job that they would be having in the mind, and then the characterization itself. Like, how did they pick all three of those?
Oh, it was great. Character creation was so fun for this. We did it about I think a month or two before we actually rolled cameras on the first part of the campaign, and I'm trying to remember who got locked in earlier. Because I think for most people it was a fun thing of, here are the noir tropes, and then what would that person's job, what would their cognitive function be? And you start to look at it, and I remember there was the fun moment of, noir stories constantly have detectives and reporters that have a similar kind. They are investigators, right? They're investigating things, but what's the purpose of the investigation? And making the distinction between curiosity and attention was really fun, because your curiosity can have you kind of be, and I love Trap too, because it was also people wanted to pick different skills to be good at. And I remember that Trap's pitch for Hunch Curio was like, he's not Sherlock Holmes. He's not particularly clever. He's just indefatigable. His sturdiness is the highest stat he has. So it's the science, and especially because Elias Hodge is a scientist, it's the idea of constant experimentation. Like, that didn't work out. That didn't work out. That didn't work out. And this, like, just, I'm never going to stop like interrogating this thing. I'm like, if I'm fascinated by it. And that the reporter angle was, oh, but a reporter investigates in order to publish. And that's the sort of special thing going on, that it's not just about investigating, it's about investigating and informing, which felt much more like attention. Like, how do the focus of attention being, I take this massive, complicated mind and communicate what we should all be cooperating and focusing on, right? And then the idea of, like, Siobhan found was like, wanted to play like the heiress femme fatale character. And you're like, ooh, but that doesn't feel like the other function. Like, what is that? Because like an heiress isn't even a job you can have. So it's like, well, it's impulse. It's something that's not necessarily like a conscious analytical thing. It's something more like that's not reflected in like the mind's bureaucracy. It's like a different kind of power. It's like, ooh, an old money family with a lot of pull. Like that pull impulse kind of thing felt very cool. And then the gangster is hyperfixation and the newsie is conscience followed. And then we're like, oh, we need someone from like the seedy under. And then immediately Freddie was like, I'm Dan Bucks. You go like, the pleasure center nightclub owner just felt like you got to have that character in there as well. It was great. It was so fun.
I also love that everyone else is a pun, and Freddie's like, nah.
No, yeah, Freddie was the immediately like, this is the tone we're gonna hit in this game, and it was so fun getting to play with Freddie. I'm like such a fan of his for a long time. It was awesome, like, you know, getting like it was great, really fun.
I love it. And I'm going to shift gears for a second, because I was at the Candela Obscura panel at Comic-Con, and when they had the teaser and you popped up, the crowd, including myself, went crazy.
Oh, that's very sweet. I really appreciate that. That was such a joy. Like, Spencer Stark is so unbelievably talented. What he pulled off in the short, you know, was like 3-episode structure, while he was working furiously on like the game itself, plus also Daggerheart. When I tell you this is like one of the hardest working men in TTRPG, one of the hardest working men in TTRPGs right now, I am not kidding. Spencer is so incredible. And it was my first time playing with Zara, who Zara Fuzzle is unbelievably talented. And then obviously Travis and Marisha and Luis, my little Calamity crew. We're back at the table with them, was so amazing. Luis, man, as many times as I could play D&D with Luis Carrazzo, sign me up. He's so good. He's so good in this season. It's unbelievable.
Can you tease anything about your character, or maybe how they fit into the group?
I think that actually there's the character creation for this was really amazing. It was a wonderful process to sort of create our characters. And the way that my character fits into the group, I think, is it's actually very interesting in this, even though we all have different sort of character builds within the game system of Candela Obscura, it's rare to find as much like cohesion and unity. Like, this is way less of a motley crew than it is people that have a really humanizing story of kind of how they came together, and sort of compared to the first season of Candela Obscura, I feel like what it is that they are. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's like heartbreaking. It's very beautiful. The story we told, it's very intense, which I know CR has done a good job of warning people. Listen, Candela Obscura is a horror thing. And this is not only horror, but it's also like horror and heartbreak. There's a lot of stuff in this season, so people should walk in, eyes wide open. We explore some very grim themes in this one.
And I know you like playing horror because you traumatized me in Fantasy High sophomore year.
Let's go.
Horrifying. What was your favorite part of getting to play in this horror genre that's maybe a little bit more gothic?
I think my favorite part, well, look, anytime I get to be a player, it's just about getting lost in a new person. And I think with the character I'm playing in this season, it's the same thing I looked for with KP Hobb, or I look for with Evan Kelp, or any other time I've ever gotten the chance to be a player at a table, is always like looking at what the GM has said the themes that we're going to explore are, and saying, like, you want to collaborate with your adventuring party and go, okay, here's this central theme, and it's like a gem or a diamond, and we're all going to be a different facet of that central theme. And so for me, a lot of the times what I'm looking for is something to do with, where does the central theme and the core ideology of the world break apart? And what's a way to look into that and find something human to latch onto within that? So that's sort of what I was trying to do this season. And I hope people like it. I had a ball. I had a really great time. And I don't just mean that because I'm holding a baseball in all the promo photos.
Yes, I did love that. You don't need to give me details on this. I'm just curious though. Robbie made one of the most insane moves I'd ever seen in the first chapter when he took a chunk of his skull out. Does this beat that? Is there a moment maybe that is like even higher than that?
Kate, I heard about that, and I'm going to tell you here for the first time, I took out 3 chunks of my skull. So who's raised the bar now? Okay. No, I heard straight up, Robbie, I haven't gotten a chance to play with Robbie yet. I want you so badly. Robbie is such an amazing player. And I need you to know that, like, I heard about that before it aired. It was so wild when it happened at the table that people were like texting about it. It's such an incredible move. And seeing the performance of Robbie just so matter-of-factly being like, I remove my hat, and take my scalpel, and make it. It's so wild. I cannot tell you anything about what happens in our season and where it lands there. But I will say that all of us salute Robbie Daymond and did our damnedest to live up to the sterling example that he set.
I love that. And then one of the things I'm liking about Candela Obscura is we're seeing different groups of players and different GMs. Is this a world you would like to GM in?
Oh my goodness! I mean, absolutely. The Candela and Daggerheart, and I mean, everything that Darrington has published has just been like, it's very, very exciting. So, but also I just love all the folks over there. And if anyone ever wants to play, they have my number. Just call me. I'll come play. I'll GM. Let me know. I love these games.
I love it. And then shifting back to Mentopolis for just a moment, what was maybe going into it, what was the most surprising thing by the end that you maybe didn't expect when you went into this, being like, okay, we're going to do this fun noir aspect of it? Like, I know it was maybe sillier than you expected, but was there anything else big picture that kind of blew your mind?
I think with Mentopolis, the thing that was, without giving any spoilers, the choices made by the PCs within this world were so fluctuate between the most like hysterically unhinged all the way to just being like truly beautiful, like sincere, earnest, heartfelt character moments that are just amazing. Just truly amazing. It was such a privilege and an honor. Really, really.
And do you have a favorite NPC? Because I'm loving Justin and Conrad's sad, "You're my best friend." How is that the saddest line? And they say it like 6 times an episode.
It's really funny. There's just Alex is so gifted, and Conrad is such a sweet character. And I feel like there's a talent for it's like saying something that is sad on its face is never as sad as being sad, and saying something like you're my best friend, and you're like, God, that's so brutal in this moment. Like, that's not, the sentiment's not sad, but the moment you chose to express it adds a context which is heartbreaking. So yeah, absolutely. And I love Justin. What a sweet good dog.
It's hilarious that there's a dog in the Mindscape.
For sure, absolutely. Well, hey, listen, we all have, like, especially when you think about the cognitive functions are not stand-ins for human beings. They're cognitive functions, right? It's like they are each facets of this setting slash mind slash city slash whatever. So it's funny that Justin is a dog, but really Justin is this mind's function of justification. And so taking the form of a dog, could have been a dog, could have been a bird, could have been a mailbox, could have been a little computer. It's like sort of just how Elias or how all of us sort of personify these elements. I feel like everyone has that ability to look at things that are inanimate or non-human and like ascribe them personalities. Brave little toaster, things that you wouldn't even think, like, you gave a personality to a toaster, and you're like, yeah, I did. I know what that toaster's like. So it feels appropriate for Justification as well.
That's amazing. And then, is there anything you can tease with episode 3? Because the ending of he's falling out the window, Brennan, when I tell you I am so mad I have to wait a week. Like,
a little bit of defenestration goes a long way. What I don't want to spoil anything, but all I'll say is this. Keep your eyes open and not just on the players.
Ooh, I like that. All right. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me. I'm loving Mentopolis. I cannot wait for more. I don't know how you do this as often as you do, because you crank out a new world like every couple months. It's insane.
I appreciate it. It's a dream come true, and it's also a lot of work. So I really appreciate that you're enjoying it. It's awesome, Caitlin. Thank you so much.